Rumored to be one of his passion projects, Rob Zombie took a swing at an oldie but a goodie in the Munsters. A passion project that may have not been the wisest choice, but was still entertaining to a point. What's up, everybody, and welcome to my review of Rob Zombie's The Munsters. We are finally at that point in this series, folks. Thank you so much, guys, for clicking. I really do appreciate it. This prequel story follows Lily and Herman Munster as they meet, fall in love, gets married, and then moves from Transylvania to the American suburb of 1313 Mockingbird Lane. So first of all, let me go on record by saying I loved the 60s show. I grew up watching that. I have the complete series on DVD that I bought like 5 months prior to the release of this film. And I'm just going to go ahead and get it all out before we start. When word spread that a new Munsters movie was coming out, I was excited, a little bit intrigued. We hadn't had one of those since the mid-90s, I believe, maybe early 90s. And then I found out who was directing it. Rob Zombie. What? Then, as news spread even more on this project, I found out it was rated PG. I almost lost my shit because this is the first movie that Rob Zombie ever directed that was not rated R. It's PG, kid-friendly, not a single F word in it, not a single sexual innuendo, which he's lots of times known for up to this point. Did I cross over into the multiverse? Am I in a dimension to where this man makes kid-friendly movies now? No, that's an over-exaggeration. Still, I mean, the kind of movies that he's done prior to this, I mean, you heard me whine and bitch about all of the movies that he's done prior to this. And just knowing his style, seriously, am I in another dimension? Just somebody tell me, please. But hey, all power to him. And again, this is another fine example of how a director just wants to stretch his legs and flap his wings and just create something other than what he's been doing. I mean, Wes Craven did it. John Carpenter has done it. All of the great ones has done it. So, like, maybe we can add Rob Zombie to that list as well. Now, I'm not saying the next movie he'll do is another dirty, filthy one like 31. I mean, who knows? This was apparently, I think, one of his passion projects. I do remember him saying every now and then that this was one of those, I think he was trying to get off the ground since the early 2000s, since his House of Thousand Corpses days. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. But I do remember hearing something about that, so yeah. So with that being said, let's start off with the positives as usual for Rob Zombie's The Munsters. The story. Growing up, watching the show, I've always been curious about the origin, about how this family started, about how Herman was created, and how shortly after that, Herman and Lily met, and where they were actually at. You know, I knew that they lived in Transylvania at one point, and I knew that something happened to make them move here to America, to 1313 Mockingbird Lane, you know, the famous place that we know of today in the 60s show, for those of you who watched it. I've always been curious about how that dynamic would, you know, play out. And I gotta say, I might be on an island with this because most of the reviews I've watched has been kind of unfavorable. And I kind of get why, which, you know, I'll get into my reasons later on. But I've always been curious about the origin story of how this family met and how Herman and Lily's adventure started. And especially about how Herman was created. Richard Brake's character plays the guy that invented him. He's not Frankenstein. He was called something else. I forget what his character's name was. That was pretty interesting. I liked seeing how all that unfolds. This movie is basically a prequel through and through on how all of this got started, leading up to the event of the 1960s show. You hear it in passing. You hear it here and there in some of the episodes of the show, but you never actually see it because the show was created for solely just that portion of their lives, of these characters, of them already being in 1313 Mockingbird Lane in America, in California, and just, you know, living out their lives with the rest of us. And as good as that show was, I really did like the whole origin story that Rob Zombie brought to his film. It showed the lab, it showed the process. Of course, Richard Brake's character playing the guy that invented him, the creator of the monster, which he was pretty good. He wasn't in it much, but he was good playing that part, Richard Brake. I knew he would play a part in this because why would he stop now in a Rob Zombie movie, but yeah, I thought he did pretty good. Now, like I said, you hear it in passing in the show of their time in Transylvania and how Herman was created and just little clues in the show. I liked it that they came full circle and just showed you in full story form in this film, in Rob Zombie's film.
Think of it. The brain of a super genius transplanted into the body of a perfect physical specimen.
I like the way Herman and Lily meets. I'm not going to give it too much away because this is a new movie. It just was released. But you find out why Herman's personality is the way he is. So after all that is said and done, you see the whole story, the whole love story, which of course it was going to be something like that. The way, the show played out, you knew it was going to be something like that. You had to have that love story, which, really did fit these characters on how Herman and Lily met. And Herman was basically in show business at one point, which I think he did mention that at some point in the show, but I can't remember. I have to refer back to it. But he was basically an entertainer. He actually sold some records at one point before he just left all that lifestyle after he met Lily. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I liked the way that played out. I liked the way, Lily fell for Herman as soon as she saw him on the boob tube. And it was pretty cool. And I gotta say, the guy that played Grandpa, Daniel Roebuck, if I'm pronouncing that name right, he played Grandpa pretty good. He was the closest of the characters in this, which I'll get to my reasonings as to why the rest of them didn't quite work out for me. But the guy that played Grandpa, Daniel Roebuck, he was actually pretty good. He's no Al Lewis, but he was close. Since this actor actually knew Al Lewis in real life, I would say that he's got more experience than any of the other actors that played in this, than Sheri Moon, Jeff Daniel Phillips, or any of them. I'd say Daniel Roebuck was probably the closest, more of a connection to that show than any of the others. But the way he played Grandpa in this movie, he was close enough. Again, no Al Lewis, but close enough. He just had that whole personality and that spunk, that love of science that you see throughout the show. For those of you who've seen the show, you know how he was. And that's kind of what you get from this actor in this film.
I can whip you up a humpy down in the lamb.
Oh, no. Remember what happened last time?
He was bad.
I think he did a great job. And it was a good casting choice from Rob Zombie. He casted that part perfectly. I like the whole Grandpa and Herman's chemistry. Like, they always had that love-hate relationship in the show. And they kept that up in this. That chemistry between them two was not lost in this movie. Grandpa was like, why did you have to fall for that buffoon, Lily? I wanted you to marry somebody like Dracula or something like that. That was all there. That was all laid out. And like I said, throughout the show, they always had that love-hate relationship. So you definitely get that in this film. It was pretty funny and somewhat. You had somewhat giggly moments in there, and I say that loosely. And for my final positive, when this movie ends, you see the montage. You see the opening of what the old 60s show has always gave out. Like that famous opening to where they're going through the door. You see Herman smash through the door. And then has that dumb look on his face. And then you see Lily follow, and then Grandpa. It does kind of bum me out that Eddie, that little kid, isn't in this. But again, prequel. Maybe that character will get introduced in the sequel if we get one. But I did like that whole montage. That was definitely a good callback, a good throwback. The film was okay to a certain extent. Rolling into this, I just watched reviews, and most of the reviews were unfavorable. Were mixed to negative. So rolling into this, I was open to anything. I was prepared. I was as prepared as I could be. I wasn't expecting this to be Shakespeare. I wasn't expecting this to be epic, grand. I was ready for anything. So as we dive into the mix, and I'll start off easily. The character Herman, played by Jeff Daniel Phillips, he was okay. He had the whole persona, the whole childlike, innocent, attitude about him. How he would throw temper tantrums and hit the walls and the tables. and just that childlike, immaturity about him. He got that down pat, especially with his laugh. Like how Fred Gwynne would always do that deep voice laugh. He got that down perfect, but what did not work for me with Jeff Daniel Phillips as this character was his voice. It was too high-pitched. And that was one of the things that I kept on hearing that was a big negative, especially coming from the trailer. So I knew that it wasn't going to be any improvement in this area. I knew that it was going to be what it was. But Jeff Daniel Phillips' voice, no offense to the actor, but he was just too high-pitched. He was no Fred Gwynne. Fred Gwynne had that tough, rough, deep exterior voice about him. That's half of what made the character in the old 1960s show. And what kind of puzzles me is I don't understand why they couldn't have amplified Jeff's voice for the film. Clear example, without giving too much away, there's a scene where Lily, Sheri Moon's character, they actually did something to her voice in one part where they actually deepened it. So if they were able to do that for that one little bit, why couldn't they done that for Jeff's voice throughout the whole movie? Make him sound more Fred Gwynne-like. I never really understood that. As soon as that scene with Sheri Moon came up, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, you chose to do that for that little part, for what you just did in that little split-second scene, yet you couldn't afford to have like a voice thing to make Jeff's voice deeper? Just saying. It just didn't work for me. It didn't feel right. It didn't sound right. But the way he played the character for the rest of his persona, like the persona and his childlike innocence, I actually did appreciate. Just that voice thing just felt off. The look and feel, it was a beautifully made movie. It looked really beautiful. You see the lightning strikes and just the coloring, and the characters really popped. At one point, there was rumors to where Universal gave Rob Zombie like $40 million to make this. In a way, I could see why people had assumed that, but right away, Rob Zombie denied all of that. I don't know how much it was actually made for, but you would think that this was one of Rob Zombie's most expensive movies, because it did have some effects, and most of it, it didn't really look that bad, honestly. But in a way, I felt like it could have benefited from it being black and white. Now, this is coming from somebody that grew up with the show. Now, anybody else that has never seen the show and has never took the time to watch a single episode, I could see why they would say, they wouldn't even put this in the mixed or negative. But, I don't know, for somebody who watched the show, I thought the film could have benefited a little better if it was in black and white. Now, I know that wouldn't have sold well. That's just unheard of with movies nowadays. Even if it's a IP like this, but still, I felt like it would have been better in black and white. Watching a Three Stooges episode in color is unheard of. They're out there. I've tried them, but it just didn't feel the same. It just took away that originality, and that's how I felt in this. As beautiful as the movie looked, I felt like the Munsters could have benefited a little bit from black and white. Now, I don't know if they did this. I don't have the Blu-ray, but it would be cool if they put an option on the Blu-ray disc itself to where you could watch it like that. I mean, they threw out a black and white version of the trailer. Why not the movie on Blu-ray? Why not a black and white version of the movie on Blu-ray? Now let's get into the things that really bugged me about this movie. And this is something that, going in, I knew fully about. You're referring to the critical reception. Diving into our negatives, the jokes. They wasn't that funny. A lot of things with the jokes happened that was just too outdated. There's this one scene where Herman and Lily was going to this restaurant in Paris. You see everybody freak out and they leave, but they speed it up just like they did in the show. And you hear all these weird sound effects. And then there's this other scene, which it shows this in the trailer, to where when they introduce themselves to the realtor after they get to America, she's dressed as a witch, but she freaks out and then she passes out.
Greetings from Transylvania.
The way that scene played out, it just felt awkward. It doesn't work for a modern audience. That's a problem that this movie has been plagued by critics. It's just outdated in a lot of things with the jokes. and it just didn't work.
Oh, I guess we're gonna have to get used to it.
Do something to have it like modernized, and they didn't really do anything. Like I say, it just came off as awkward, and it didn't really work. It just felt really outdated, very awkward. They should have modified it for more modern audiences in some capacity. And let's talk Sharon Moon. The way she played Lily in this, she was definitely no Yvonne DiCarlo. Now, I know that when you're a filmmaker and you're trying to make a project your own, it is your own. But there's a point to where when you're doing a movie that's based on something that was classic, you've got to match it just a little bit. And with Sharon Moon's character as Lily, I felt like she was trying too hard. It felt forced, especially with her dialogue and just the way she would present herself. It just felt forced, and it just took me out of it. Again, no Yvonne DiCarlo. She wasn't as relaxed. She just didn't give that Lily vibe off to me that I wanted. She just felt more on edge than anything else than what I wanted from the character throughout the runtime. And speaking about the runtime, this movie is only an hour and 50 minutes, just under 2 hours. It felt like 3 hours. It felt longer because the tone of it was a little boring because of the jokes and just the way it was handled and the way it was not modernized for modern audiences. Most of it just came off awkward and weird, and it just, the whole time I was like this. Okay, was that supposed to be funny? Okay, moving on. Because of that, the tone just felt watered down, and it just really didn't grab me that much. It just didn't really work. It felt grounded. It just didn't work. It just wasn't much there in terms of enjoyment because of its outdatedness. And to be honest, something like this, I would have pegged more of like Tim Burton or Barry Sonnenfeld to do. Because the fact that Rob Zombie has done this, it does raise a question mark, that's for sure. Especially of all the movies he's done prior to this. And I know it was a passion project of his. He's been a definite big fan of the series. But for something like this to come out now, it would have made more sense if Tim Burton from the Addams Family had done it, or Barry Sonnenfeld of Men in Black. Just either of those guys, because their stylistic choices probably would have fit a little better for this film, for something like this. Plus the writing department would have been probably a little bit better, just a tad bit better, because Rob Zombie has a definite problem in not putting down the pen, but his dialogue and his storytelling, he's great as a director. Rob Zombie, I adore him. He's great as a director. He's an awesome director. But in the writing department, no. Just no. In the end, guys, the film was okay. You'll have a better time with the old 60s show than the film in the long run. I was caught off guard. So Rob Zombie's The Munsters. Have you seen it yet? What was your thoughts on it? Were you a fan? Did you enjoy the whole origin story between how Lily and Herman met and the creation of Herman and just how this family, came to be from the 60s show? Or was this too much of a buzzkill? Are you somebody that enjoys the TV show more than the film? Leave me a comment down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share the Big Four. Make sure to click that bell icon so you don't miss a thing. And I will see you on the next one, which will be a ranking of all Rob Zombie's movies. So stay tuned for that. And I will see you then. Peace.